Hello, I'm Laura Breksa. I'm going to share with you how to know what you want and when you got it. I want you to remember through this presentation 2 truths and 1 guiding principle. 2 truths and 1 guiding principle. Those 2 truths are that each choice is basically choosing between self, objective, and relationship. The other truth is children have agency. They can make choices for their own selves. And the principle is no success can compensate for failure in the home. I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit more in detail. The 3 choices are self, objective, and relationship. When I mean self, I'm talking about your health, looks, self-respect, personal goals, so forth. Things that are all about you. The objective is often what we think of as a goal. Run a marathon, win first place at a spelling bee, lose 10 pounds. Objective. Now, the relationship with others are either healthy or not. They can be deep relationships, meaningful relationships, light relationships. They're your connection with another person. Now, getting all at the same time with 1 goal and 1 choice would be quite the sweet spot, but the most you're likely to get is 2 out of 3. I don't want to say it would never happen. I don't know. But mostly you're going to get at best is 2 out of 3 of those. I want to give you some examples more of how these choosing between self, objective, and relationship applies to homeschooling. First, self. Looks. We'll take that part of self. There's an example of this in the movie Wonder. Julia Roberts' character is the mother. She homeschools her son. She looks dowdy. I think she even has like a dragon type of sweater on, dragging type of sweater. And when her son goes back to school, she goes back to writing, I believe it's her dissertation, and her looks improve. I think she ends up in that little feel-good part of the movie with the little Levi jacket on. Her looks improve quite a bit. So in making the choice to homeschool her child, the writers have her not choosing self. She gives that time up. That's how they just demonstrate that. Her relationship with their kid is great. Her relationship with her husband is great. It's a sweet movie for those reasons, just to see those relationships. But as the writers showed, her looks were not what was chosen when she chose to spend her time homeschooling and in those relationships. And even further is her space that she used for her desk, as the movie shows, was the schoolroom. So she even gave that part of herself up. It can happen when you make a choice. You can't do everything all at once, not all at the same time. Maybe you can, but usually not at the same time. Another thing about self that falls under self is your pride. Your pride in your children, what they can accomplish. If you're new to homeschooling, you may not be aware of this, but you can start going to play groups and hang out with other homeschoolers, and there will be maybe 1 mom or parent who has a lot of self-esteem based on her children's accomplishments. And they'll talk about it like that. And it's kind of like they brag about it because somehow it reflects on them. It might, but it also might not. And while this can be dangerous, is because you might be willing to sacrifice the relationship with the child to push the child to succeed in something so you can say your child succeeded. It looks like you're sacrificing yourself to have that child accomplish something, but the purpose may really be to make yourself feel good. So you could be choosing self over the relationship. These are all tangly. It's a really simple diagram, self, objective, relationship, but you have to untangle them because they kind of get messy sometimes. And that's part that you'll when I explain later how to know what you want, a little bit more sense, but I want you to understand that that is tangly. You can think you're choosing objective, but you're really choosing yourself if the person who benefits from the objective being made is you. An example of this is meal times, family dinner times. Family dinner gets dismissed in order for children to participate in lessons and practices for their individual objectives. Now that might be fine for families, for some families. It wasn't fine for mine. In fact, I'm going to use a lot of what I'm teaching you is going to be based on my experience. 7 years homeschooling, 4 kids, very different temperaments. Oldest one was almost 10 when the youngest one was born. We decided to have family dinner. It was going to happen no matter what. So what that meant was my children did not get to go to activities and sports that had practice or classes during dinner hour. There was a particular hour and a half, I think it was 5 to 6:30. And that's when things were going down, but they couldn't participate. In fact, they were at one fencing club and we moved to another whose classes were after 7. That's the way we ran with it. Because I figured that a child who wants to learn to dance can learn to dance as an adult. They can make up for some of that time, but there is no way that I can ever make up for the dinner at home when we were all living together. And those are precious times. So that's what we gave up. So I couldn't go on and write a whole bunch of Christmas letters about all my children doing all these things because I wasn't running around taking the practice because we were home eating my meals, which weren't so great. Hopefully the table was set pretty, but we were together in a meal. We made that was our priority. That was our objective. Speaking of objective, I want to give you an example of an objective that compromised the relationship. It was a man I knew, met him in Japan when we were there for a little while. He was telling us, sadly, this is with great regret, I think it was a warning to us. He used to get his son up, I think he had 2, super early in the morning and just drill him and drill him and drill him and drill physical fitness. I think they had weights and running and drill him and to get him tough. And he thought he was doing something great for them. Well, they didn't like it. They did it, but they didn't like it. And they've hated him. They have no relationship whatsoever. They got the strong bodies, but no relationship to this day. And he was an old man. These men were grown. So he had an objective, but he gave it up, gave the relationship up to get the objective. See the choices? Those are the choices in homeschooling that we have. If a child has an objective and you're alongside him supporting him, that can be a relationship builder. It's tangly. You got to be careful. You got to think it through. Got to write it down. We'll talk about that in a minute. For the relationship choice, I read once a wise woman named Marjorie Hinckley was talking to her daughter-in-law. The daughter-in-law was saying she didn't know what to do. She had her little boy in swimming lessons and he would not, I think, put his head under the water. And she just didn't know how to get him to do that. And she's talking to her mother-in-law, Marjorie Hinckley. Marjorie Hinckley said, this has stuck with me for years. She said to her daughter-in-law, just save the relationship. And that was such a simple phrase, but it really meant a lot to me. Just save the relationship, which goes back. The objective, put your head on the water. But if it's straining the relationship, is it worth it? Is he going to learn to do it later? Yes. Is there another way to do it? I don't know. But can you do it while maintaining the relationship? That's the way to go. In fact, I am biased toward always saving the relationship unless the relationship is unhealthy. And of course, we've seen people give up their self-respect to maintain a relationship that was going nowhere. Have you seen that? I think we all have. And the opposite can happen. People can choose to maintain a relationship out of self-respect, and they can also choose self over a relationship. So, for example, you have a father who chooses his self, or a mother who chooses their own needs so fast and so strongly that they completely blow the relationship with their child. That's when they choose self over relationship. Then you have people that want the relationship so much that, as I said earlier, they'll give up their self-respect to maintain a relationship. We don't want that. You got to think through. So truth number 2, children have agency. They have the power to make choices on their own, and they will use that power as soon as they figure it out when they're like little. Learn the word no, and make their own choices. And that's very challenging to a homeschooling parent. You cannot send them to the principal. You can't send notes home. You can do all the color-coded things you want, the consistency of that. If you're that disciplined, you can keep that all up. That's wonderful. I was not. I'm here to teach you from my mistakes as well as my successes, and I'll tell you I had a really hard time with that. To keep the little red cards and blue cards, like red, green, and yellow cards, warning system, or some kind of reward thing going on, it would change every school year. Choices. You got to respect your kid's choices. 2 truths. Every choice is between self, objective, and relationship, and children can make choices. And the principle we're talking about is no success can compensate for failure in the home. Now, what I wanted for my kids was that they knew how to think, pray, work, and play. Those are the 4 things that I wanted my kids to be able to do. I figured if they could do those 4 things, they were going to have a healthy, happy life. To think, to pray, to work, and to play. I wanted them to be able to think on their own. I didn't want them just to go with the crowds. I didn't even want them just doing what an adult told them to do because an adult told them to do it. I wanted them to think critically about issues, have opinions. Now, that came at a cost because, they disagreed with me about things. But I wanted them to be able to think through and solve their problems. I wanted them to know how to pray, to go to church, to call on their Heavenly Father, to know that they were worth to their God, that they were important, that they could repent, that they could be with their family forever. And I wanted them to know how to work, because work is a vital, celestial, if you want to say, spiritual value. You've got to be able to work. And I wanted them to be able to play, probably in that order, to be able to think for themselves, pray to find out if what they're thinking is on course, be able to work out the problem, and then to play. That's what I wanted. And do you know how I knew I got it? I paid attention. My kids do think. If they don't choose to pray, it wasn't because I didn't teach them how to pray. I taught them how to pray. They make their choices. They can work. They're very hard workers. And I've seen them have fun. The fun part, maybe I wasn't so good at when they were growing up, but we had fun. We traveled, we did things. Those are the 4 things that I wanted. And how did I know what I wanted? I eliminated all that I didn't want. I eliminated all that I didn't want. I wrote it down. I was careful. And that's the first step for you to do to know how to know what you want. You've got to write down all that you don't want in your preferred recording mode in a way that you can save it and look to it often. Think of what you don't want, short-term and long-term. Examples. You don't want to wake up to the load of clean laundry on the couch that needs to be folded. You don't want to wake up to that in the morning. You don't want your 30-year-old son to come back and live with you in your basement playing video games all day. You don't want that. You don't want to be 60 and look back on your child who look at your child who smokes and realize you're the one that introduced him to smoking because you smoked when he was younger. You don't want to stand before your God and have to answer for things that you did that you never repented of, that you never apologized and tried to make right. That's what you don't want, right? Those are examples, short and long term, because it's a long, and homeschooling, parenting is in the long term. Big picture. Then you start thinking about what you do want. And when you do, you're going to write it down again. What do you want? You sit back. What do you want tomorrow? What do you want in 5 years? What do you want your kid to be like in 30 years? What do you want to be at the end of your life? What do you want to look back on? And just write it down. Just free thinking, categories, however you think, whatever works for you. but get it down. This needs to be a quiet time. This needs to be a reflective time. This needs to be praying time. And remember what you're choosing between: self, objective, relationship. And be careful what you give up to get the other. And you know how you know you got it when you pay attention. And keep those lists handy. Make your yearly goals based on those things. Check up, look, see how it's going. Correct course if you have to stick with what you want so you can get it. If you grow as a person and realize that something that you thought you once wanted, you don't anymore, well, by golly, make the change. I knew a woman, she'd been happily married for, I don't know, over 40 years, I think, when I knew her. And she married a short man who was in the Navy. But she joked around that when she was growing up, she said she'd never marry a short man in a uniform. So we grow past some of our ideas, and that's good. We grow and we learn. And remember that your kids can make a choice, and your objective has to take that into account. Sit with your kids. What do you want to do? What do you want to learn? That's the freedom of homeschooling, as they can learn what they want to learn, how they want to learn it, in their best way. It can all be tailored to them. We had a lot of fun doing project-based learning. 2 truths you choose in between: self, objective, and relationship. You're probably not going to get all 3 at the same time. Your best to hope for is 2 out of 3, but be careful when you decide what you want to keep in mind what you need to give up to get the other. Think of the opportunity cost, which is what you lose out on, such as getting your kids to do lots of activities all after dinner and during dinner hours. You're going to give up this relationship building family dinner time. Be aware. The second truth is that children have choices, and they will choose differently than you want them to choose. If you're a parent for any amount of time, you know that to be true. And how do you maintain that relationship when a child chooses differently than you would like them to choose? You maintain that relationship. That's your goal. That's what you want. You want your 40-year-old son to call you and still talk to you, even though he lives a different lifestyle than you wanted him to live. That wasn't your objective. You're going to have to rely on grace to do that and keep the communication and still love him, because at that point it is just save the relationship. And the overriding principle is no success can compensate for failure in the home. So when you make your list of what you don't want and what you do want, keep that in mind, that the home is the most important place for all this to occur, which I am thinking you agree with, or you wouldn't be homeschooling. Don't worry if anybody else thinks that you're wonderful or you're fantastic or your kids are all this and that and get a lot of attention. It's not the way you really want to go. Giving you advice: don't compare yourself to others. Don't look on Facebook. Don't sit around at playgroups and talk about and get inundated with what other people are doing. Let it affect how you feel about yourself, because you're going to write down what you don't want. And maybe one of the things you don't want is you don't want to feel all put down by others, right? You're going to want to stay true to your course, authentic to what your God wants you to do, because you're going to decide what you don't want. And you're going to write down what you do want. And then you're going to put markers where you can know you're successful, because you're going to be watching. You want Johnny to learn how to play 2 + 2, right? That's your objective. That's what you want. You want him to master that skill. Well, that's a helpful, wonderful skill. And you can do it while maintaining a relationship, because he's going to want to know math too, because you're going to make it fun, right? You're going to know you got it, because he's going to be able to pass the test. But you're not going to compare Johnny to anybody else's kid. You're going to love him the way he is, because he's making his choices. He is who he is. And that is what he needs. He needs you to succeed at home, being his homeschooling mom, by loving him. So you can see I'm biased toward always choosing the relationship when possible when you're choosing 3. But I hope this helps. Start with what you don't want. Consider the cost between self, objective, and relationship. Keep in mind that your children may not want the same things you want, and be careful of not destroying relationship over those differences. And remember that no success can compensate for failure in the home. And that is a quote by David O. McKay. You have a good one. Good luck.